hats. I got hats that say Chief of Police on. I'm the real Chief of Police hat. I got hats.
I started it. He don't know I started it. Hey, gun people. We're here BSing. We're talking about guns in line of sight. So we're with Uncle Buck. I asked him if he wanted to wear my hat. He said he didn't want to look gay. Can you believe that shit? This is what I put up with, people.
That's right.
All right.
Well deserved.
So we're sitting here talking about it. I saw that little scope thing, and he was sighting in a scope, and I saw a little level, and I said, Buck, sometimes I shoot with my gun at an angle. And he goes, yeah. He goes, you shouldn't. It ought to be up and down. I go, why? And he explained it. I thought it was pretty cool. So, Buckster, explain to us line of sight and all that other crazy crap.
All right. Here's this little cheap $6 level I bought at Home Depot. I use it to make sure that the rifle is level in this little vise that I'm using. And once I level the rifle, then I put the scope in, then I put the level on top of the scope, turn caps, and make sure that it in fact is level and everything is copacetic. Now there are some devices which will attach to the back end of your ocular end of the scope, which allows you to have a bubble level that you can see, and that will let you know that hey, you're vertical.
It's inside by the red.
It's up here.
It's on top.
Outside, but you can still see it in your field of view.
Okay.
One of the night vision devices I had has a cant and a pitch device inside there, which measures electronically, what whether you're straight up and down. Why is that important? Here's the bottom line. Now, this represents the line of sight here from the scope to the target.
Straight line.
It's a straight line. And this bottom one represents the barrel, and it's actually converges up and it goes, the bullet departs the barrel and starts dropping at 16 feet per second squared. There is actually, optically...
It always drops at 16 feet squared?
Absolutely.
Oh, really?
Unless you're shooting straight up, then it just slows down. But the acceleration of gravity, God's G, is always the same. So, if you dropped a bullet or dropped anything, it will fall roughly 16 feet in the first second. But then the number of seconds squared, it gets faster and faster and faster until it reaches a terminal velocity based upon the drag through the air. Now, you'll see in this drawing,
all that technical shit.
The bullet crosses the line of sight around 25 or 30 yards and comes back down here. We'll say this is a 100-yard zero, and then as you can see, the bullet continues to drop. As the farther out you go, the faster it drops. So, people ask, well, why do you draw it where they look like they're pointing towards each other? Because they actually are optically. You don't see that in the scope because they appear to be parallel when in fact they're really not.
So that scope is actually pointing down.
Optically it is. It's pointed down. Why? Because if the scope was perfectly parallel to the receiver and the bore, you'd never hit anything. You'd always be a minimum of 1.5 inches low, because that's the difference between this center line of the line of sight and the center line of the bore. So you start off 1.5 inches low and you stay 1.5 inches low from the first 25 or 30 yards, and then you get 1 inch to 2 inches low at 100, 5 inches low at 150, 12 inches low at 200, etc.
So you'd always have to aim higher than your target if it was straight.
Absolutely. You have to do that, and you do that with a scope or with iron sights so that you elevate the bore so you can toss the bullet into the target. Now, where that becomes a problem is at longer ranges. Like here, you see a very small convergence.
Where'd you say convergence? Oh.
Convergence here, and it crosses over at 25 yards and it's back on 100. If you're shooting at 800 yards, the convergence is brought a lot closer to the rifle. So there's a lot of up motion in there to get the rifle to...
it's unloaded. I got it, Buck.
It's not loaded now.
Yeah.
What I want to show you is you can see that the bore is about 1.5 inches high. When you cant to the left, the vertical motion of the bullet is no longer vertical. It's now to the left.
Oh,
and there is no vertical, so you will hit left and low every single time if you hold the rifle to the left 90 degrees. If you hold the rifle to the right 90 degrees, you will hit right and low every single time.
So, but just turning it 45 degrees, you'll never be zero.
You will never hit the target if you hold it 45 degrees.
Oh.
And 5 degrees. At 700 yards, 5-degree cant is about a foot miss every single time. You'll be hit 5 degrees right, you'll hit low and right 5 to 10 inches. 5 degrees left.
I've never even really concentrated on that. Didn't you say also they have a little sight up here that you can hook on the barrel, a level?
I just had a Winchester 1885 rifle in 4570, which came from the factory with a bubble level on the front sight. You can see it from the back.
Wow.
And you look through the peep sight, you can see the front sight, you can actually see the bubble level, and you make sure that you are not canted, because the farther out you go, the more exacerbated the left lift and right lift, we'll say that, because the bullet's actually climbing, going towards the target straight away. So it's very important for a shooter to be able to keep the vertical aspect of his presentation as perfect as he can in order to hit the target.
Never ever thought of that when I was
Even
shooting.
in no wind condition, you can't just a little bit. Can't left, you're going to be left and low at long range. You'll be slightly left at 100 yards.
Right. That's what I say. At close distances, it's not going to.
Yeah, and guys sit there, well, I had my rifle sighted in, but it shoots a little bit left. I said, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you shoot a little bit to the left. Because a lot of guys have a tendency, when they shoulder a rifle, they'll put it up here, and I'm doing this, I can't, you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see the scope real well there, but guess what? I've got about a 14-degree left cant. Some guys, if they shoot left-handed, do the same thing. They'll roll the scope towards their eye,
right,
so that to make it easier, so they don't have to move their head over. And you find that they're shooting to the right. Okay, at 100 yards, it's a matter of inches. At 500 yards, it's a matter of feet. So, for guys that want to shoot long distances, you've got to be very, very cognizant of the fact that whether you're straight up and down or not. This Prairie Dog rig is one I've used out to 800 yards. It's a 243. I shoot a 70 grain bullet, hand loaded to 3,600 feet per second. It has a Kanjar trigger, set trigger, about 4 ounces. It's a great little rig. I can make headshots on prairie dogs a quarter mile away all day long. And I've shot thousands of rounds at those little prairie dogs, which are not very big. They're about the size of a 10-ounce soda plastic bottle. And at 400 yards, they're pretty tiny. But you can make called headshots on them with a rifle that's this accurate, because it'll shoot a tenth of an MOA, and that's a minute of angle. So it'll shoot. You can stack bullets on top of each other 100, and at 400 yards it'll be a quarter of an inch group. Well, this a lot smaller than the head of a prairie dog.
Right.
So it's a nice rifle, and I take care of it, and I don't let it get hot when I shoot it. But it's got a 20 power loophole, long range scope on there,
and why don't you let it get hot?
Because when you get hot, you get enhanced throat erosion, or exacerbated throat erosion would be a better word. As a barrel gets hot, it gets soft. It's just like butter. When you take butter right out of the refrigerator, guess what? It's kind of hard. You got to, if you take frozen butter and try to cut it with a knife, it doesn't want to cut. Refrigerator butter, you can cut with a knife. Butter that's room temperature, you put a knife on there and you can cut it with a spoon.
Right.
It's real simple. Steel is the same way. The hotter it gets, and the throat is that portion of the rifle which is just in front of the cartridge. It's about where the round starts to, the round ends, and the rifling begins just past the throat. And there's about an 1,800 degree flame of burning powder. When you fire the round, some people have a misconception on how the rounds actually work. The primer sets off the powder and starts building up gas. The gas pushes out the powder and the bullet down the bore. Now, notice I said the powder and the bullet. The gas, the powder does not turn to gas inside the case. It burns for the entire length of the barrel, and in case of an AR-15, they're designed for a 20-inch barrel. You shoot a 14 or 16-inch barrel, you'll have unburned powder and a big old muzzle flash and a big kaboom at the end of the muzzle, but there's unburned powder in there.
Can't you put just faster burning powder? Or would you increase?
No, if you run to faster burning powder, what you run into is higher pressures, because you have to modulate the rate at which you uh, accelerate the powder burn because I was reading in one of these manuals recently. It's a Spear Manual number 8 from about 1975, so I've had it a while, talking about 357 Magnums with a 2.5-inch barrel and trying to get the absolute maximum velocities out of it. They found that you get better velocities not using the fastest burning powder, but a slightly slower powder, because the powder continues to burn not only in the case, in the throat, and in the barrel, but it's continuing to expand and causing the pressure to stay higher longer after the bullet has exited the case. Whereas the faster burning powder, like Bullseye, burns almost instantaneously, and you reach a pressure level to which you're happy with, we'll say 35,000 psi, and you have to stop, or you start damaging the throat of the rifle, the throat of the pistol, the forcing cone, the locking lugs. You can blow out the bottom of the cylinder where the locking lug is, and you can also blow out the primer, come back and damage the hammer. So there's some things that happen really bad if you use too much fast powder. So most rifle cartridges, the powder continues to burn almost to the muzzle, some cases out past the muzzle. That's why you don't use, you have to be very careful with a suppressor on a 5.56 or 223 pistol. If you have 7-inch barrel, you're only burning about half of your powder. And so the powder gets dumped into the suppressor, and it doesn't all burn because there's not any oxygen in there after the first round. And so after time after time after time of dumping powder into the suppressor, you can have a detonation when you go to reload and you pull the magazine out, leave the barrel, or leave a source for air to make it into the suppressor again, and the next time you put a flame pattern into the suppressor, it will light off that powder which is being laying down there in the little quick.
That's bad juju.
Bad juju, because the can goes boom and disappears, and you went, there's $8,000. You know, so it's gone, and you're not going to be able to find any usable parts of it. So
now, can you if you brings up another question about, because you make silencers.
Yes.
If you damage a silencer like that because you've already got your tax stamp and it's serial numbered, can you legally make another can with the same serial number and fix? No.
No. You can.
So it's
if the tube is damaged, you're pretty much hosed. Now, some cases, like my suppressors have interchangeable, the baffles and spacers are interchangeable. I can take them out and put them back in. If you get a baffle strike and you damage, say, baffle 5, 6, and 7, and the end cap, I can probably repair that. And go back in and square off the end of it and check the threads and make custom new parts and put them back in there, because the tube is not damaged. But if you send one out the side of a tube, you just ate it.
Wow.
So it's an important thing to do. Make sure that the suppressor doesn't get loose. That's generally what most people have a problem with baffle strikes, or they have the barrels improperly threaded, and the threads they're not concentric with the bore line.
Right.
Bad juju. Because you only have around 1 millimeter of space, which is 40,000th of an inch, between the bullet and the baffles. Well, that's 40,000 divided by 2. There's 20,000 on top and 20,000th of an inch on the bottom. So for that bullet to go through there, if you're shooting a 30 caliber suppressor with a 30 caliber can.
So if you were having to hit the can when you fired, there's a chance of a rifle strike, because that's not much.
If the can is loose, for example, and starts hanging loose on the threads, you'll probably hit it with a baffle strike. And because of the physics involved with a rotating projectile has a lot of energy stored up in the rotation as well as in the horizontal movement or lateral movement. So when you disrupt
like a top,
it's like a top. When you touch it, because the right hand rule, the bullet tends to want to turn. If you touch it on the left, it's going to turn 90 degrees to that and try to go to the right. And sometimes it'll turn enough to catch a lip on the next baffle and follow that lip right on out the side of the can. So I've seen that happen before in videos. So it's,
Wow.
it's not a bad thing to have happen. So you want to make sure that these suppressors are tight. So we've gone far afield from what we started talking
Yeah, no
about.
kidding.
But that lets you know how important it is to keep your rifle vertical.
Right.
And-
And when you're having a scope mounted, make sure it's
Make
mounted
sure
vertical
the
and right.
scope
Yeah.
is mounted vertically, because that can cause you, if the scope is mounted like 10 degrees left, well, what you try to do is you'll turn the rifle this way
To make your line straight.
to make it line straight, and you've introduced an error. And
Yeah.
you can still zero it at 100 yards, but the farther you go out, the more you're going to have problems with it, because it's still the you don't have a perfectly vertical lift element in the design. It's got a cattywampus. So
Alrighty. Well, we're at 15 minutes, Buckster. Hey, thanks, Buck. Lone Star Shooting Supply. Buy his book. He's got all his books. I'll put a link in the description. And thanks for sharing your wealth of information there, Buckster.
all right, have a great week.
Have a good New Year, everybody.